Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to welcome two guest presenters to this webinar this morning. So hello, greetings. My name is Melissa. I am the Associate Product Manager here at Dubility, the company behind SurveyCTO. Thank you again so much for joining us today for this webinar. This is called How Laterite Uses Text Audits and Python to Optimize Survey Management. We're very excited for this presentation. I think we're going to learn a lot, and everyone will walk away with some really good ideas of how to strengthen their own data collection. Laterite is a firm based in East Africa. They specialize in research for social impact, combining data, research, and analytics to maximize the social impact of your work by delivering full cycle research projects and evaluations that support effective decision making. All right, thank you if you're just joining us. Once again, my name is Melissa, and we are starting the webinar, How Laterite Uses Text Audits and Python to Optimize Survey Management. Hello, Brian. Thank you for joining us from Malawi. Hello, everyone. All right, so to get everyone started and situated here, I just want to draw your attention to your screens, as there are a number of buttons at the bottom that you'll need to fully experience the webinar. So as you'll see, for number one, for the polls that we are going to run, click the polls button on the bottom of your screen. You can engage with the other attendees during the webinar by clicking the chat button there in the bottom of your screen to the right. And then if you have questions for the presenters that you hope can be covered during the discussion that will follow the webinar, please use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen to the left. All right. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Melissa, and we are here for a wonderful presentation from two guest presenters from Laterite. I'm now going to hand this over to my colleague Mafia, and he's going to personally introduce our presenters.
All right, thank you so much, Melissa. Welcome again, everyone, to this webinar. My name is Mafia Piri. I'm a member of the customer support team at Dubility. We basically are the people you get in touch with whenever you have a question about how to use SurveyCTO. And I'm happy today to be moderating this particular webinar with our team from Laterite. So I'll just introduce our presenters, and then I will let them get on with it. So we have two presenters. The first is Bizrat Gateway. He's a data analyst at Laterite. Bizrat is responsible for running various quality checks on incoming data, as well as coding of survey questionnaires into SurveyCTO. Bizrat holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Addis Ababa University, and he's keenly interested in data. So Bizrat is our first presenter. The second is Samuel Nazramba, who is an innovations associate at Laterite. Samuel is responsible for improving, streamlining, and automating processes and systems to maximize efficiency. Samuel holds a Master of Science in Information Technology from Carnegie Mellon University and a Bachelor's in Computer Science from Makerere University. Before he joined Laterite, Samuel worked as an applications developer at a technology startup, and later as a teaching assistant at Carnegie Mellon University, Africa, with a focus on data science and information security. So these are our presenters for today. I will actually just hand over to them. They'll share what they have, and then later on we'll be able to engage in a brief discussion with them, but also get to answer any of the questions that you have. So if you have any question, as Melissa indicated, we have the Q&A box where you can type in your questions, and we'll be able to get to them at an appropriate time. So Bizrat and Samuel, please go ahead and take it up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mofia. I will go ahead and share my screen. Bisrat and Mofia, please give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Right, yeah, thank you, Morpheus, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar. We are very excited that you could join us. Today, we are going to be speaking to you about how we use text audits and our Python script that we developed to optimize our survey management. Yep, we've been introduced in the organization, but I would like to share some numbers with you just to illustrate for you what we do at Laterite. In the past year, across the 5 East African countries that we operate in, we were able to deploy over 1,200 enumerators that interviewed over 80,000 respondents across 98 survey instruments. We spent around 26,000 days of fieldwork for both in-person and telephone interviews. This is around 71 years, if you like to put it in years. We also produced over 30 reports from our analysis work. So this is just to share with you a bit about the work that we do at Laterite. Today, we are going to be speaking to you about how we go about survey management, specifically on duration. But before we jump into that, I would just like to emphasize that we'll be sharing our approach to measuring survey using the script that we developed and text audit data. And our hope is that you can take this tool and use it and incorporate it in your work, but also you can learn about text audit data and leverage it in your workflow to optimize survey management. The tools that we will be speaking about today will be shared on GitHub, so you'll have access to it. We'll not be able to go through each line by line, the full tool, but you'll have time to access it and go through it. Now, why is survey duration or measuring accurately of the duration of interviews so important? I'll explain some of the reasons from our context. If you have participated or you've conducted primary data collection, you understand that this is both a time-consuming endeavor, but also very expensive, both on in terms of cost, but also on the time of respondents. So one of the main reasons why you need to have accurate survey duration is related to cost. Longer interviews usually mean higher cost. In our context, the biggest driver of cost is enumerator days. These are the days that data collectors spend in the field. And the number of days that data collectors spend in the field is strongly linked to the length of the interview. So therefore, longer interview will mean higher cost. Let's also not forget that that means also higher cost on the side of the respondent in terms of time. They need to spend more time in the interviews. So it's very, very important to have accurate duration for your interview. The second reason is related to planning. Before we go to the field, we normally make plans, for example, understanding how many interviews will be able to be conducted within a day, but also how much time we need to travel between one enumeration area to the next. And this is all linked or strongly linked to the duration of the interviews that we are going to conduct on those particular days. So it's extremely important to make sure you have an accurate duration of your interview. The third reason is related to quality. You can learn a lot about the quality of a question by looking at how long it's taking the enumerators to complete in the field. This might mean that you need to do extra training for your enumerators to be able to administer these questions much more efficiently. Or it could also mean that you need to review those questions and make adjustments. They might not be properly or correctly phrased. So these are some of the main reasons why, at least in our context, you need to have accurate duration for your interviews. To illustrate how our tool works, and why it's extremely important to have accurate survey duration, I'm going to use an example from one of our offices in Ethiopia on a data collection project there. And this is a typical scenario that normally happens in our work. So it's not a one-off case. This is something that happens from time to time. I'll describe this example and demonstrate for you how the script works and how we use text audit data. So about this project, we conducted a data collection project in Ethiopia. And before we set out to go to the field to collect data, we normally do a lot of planning. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this planning is based on the estimated duration of the interviews that we are going to conduct. In this particular case, we had determined the number of days we'll spend in the field. We had built a team, optimal team size that we need to be able to complete this data collection project within the set timelines. We had also identified the enumeration areas and the travel plans to reach those different places. So what could possibly go wrong? After the first week of data collection, our internal team discovered that the length of the interviews that we had estimated was over by 10 minutes. Now, this is not something that is unusual. This is something that typically happens as the field situation, the field dynamics are always different to what we can expect or can plan for. So there are always these scenarios that can happen and that we need to be prepared for. And in this particular case, we found out that our interviews were 10 minutes over. Now, you might think that maybe 10 minutes is not relatively a lot of time. But to give you a bit of perspective, that extra 10 minutes meant that we needed to add 10 extra days to our data collection plan to spend more days in the field to be able to complete the data collection with the same team. Or alternatively, we needed to have 5 more data collectors added to the team to be able to complete that data collection within those specific timelines. Let's not forget that on the part of the respondents, this means that extra 10 minutes from their time that we had not planned for. So just 10 minutes over planned for interviews could have significant implications on the planning for our project and ultimately the cost of the project. So how do we address this, when it happens in the field? There are a couple of ways that we can do this. One, we could increase the resources, as I mentioned earlier. We could increase the team size. We could increase the number of days we'll spend in the field and maintain the same length of the instrument, so not make any adjustments to it. However, this doesn't always work in the field, as there are other constraints related to timelines and budget. And also, this solution does not take into account the time commitment on the side of the respondent. This is something that we always need to think about as well. Now, the second alternative would be to make adjustments to that survey instrument, bring it down to the length that we had planned for, and go ahead with the same team size and the same field plan. But this introduces another question. How can we precisely take 10 minutes away from that interview to bring it back to 60 minutes? This process is not straightforward, as you can imagine, especially if you work with a specific client. They have certain needs, and this process is a collaboration effort between, in this case, us and the client. We have different engagements to be able to bring down this instrument to that length. And that involves understanding exactly and precisely how long each of the questions in the instrument is taking. And that is what we try to determine at this point. So how can we get this timing information? SurveyCTO provides us a couple of options. One is related to the timing variables that you get with your SurveyCTO form. So you have a duration, you have start and end time that come with your SurveyCTO form. And this gives you length of your instrument in terms of seconds, but the overall length of that instrument. However, what we are more interested in is specific question level time information, as we are looking to reduce by 10 minutes, and we need to know for each question how long it's taking. Another option that we have with SurveyCTO is text audit data, which gives us detailed information for each of the questions in the survey. Now, this is really nice And at this point, I'll just spend a bit more time speaking about SurveyCTO's text audit, as it's very central to how our script works. So what are text audits? Text audits are basically record information about your question in the survey. Now, two kinds of information that you receive with text audits. One is around how long the question is taking in your survey, but the other is around how long in the survey your question first appeared. So those are the two kinds of information that you receive with text audits. Now, the next question might be, how do I get this information? It's easy to get this information, and you can get text audit information by simply including a text audit field in your survey, as you can see in the picture there with the red arrow. But you also have a number of options related to how that timing information that you receive from text audit looks like. Those options include, could be set within the appearance column. So you could set event log or choices in the appearance column with the text audit row, and you can have a different nature of information that you receive. Still timing information, but different nature of it, could be more detailed. But in this presentation, I'll focus on the percentage option, which is you can indicate what percentage of those submissions you would like to receive text audit information for. And in that picture, you can see we set it at 100, which means that we collect text audit information or timing information for all the submissions that we receive. And we recommend this when you're at the early stages of the project, to be able to collect as much information about how long your survey is taking before you can change this to maybe a smaller figure, let's say 50%. So the next logical question would be like, okay, then how do I get the data once I've set this up in the form? Well, you can get this information by using SurveyCTO's desktop application. When you download data using the SurveyCTO desktop application, it creates a folder named media. And within that folder, it's where all the CSV files containing text audit data are stored. Each submission includes a text audit CSV file. As you can see there, the text audit data CSV files are named in such a way that you have a TA, which stands for text audit, underscore, and some alphanumeric values. So if you see something like this in your media file, these are text audit files. So you have your text audit data information. You have all the information that you need because you have timing at the question level given to you by the text audit files, but not quite yet, and I'll explain. The kind of information that you see from text audits is still in raw format, as you can see the picture on my screen. It's still in raw format. Each submission comes with a text audit file. This means that you have a bunch of CSV files that contain timing information that are aggregated. And what would be useful for us, and even for this particular project, is to have information that is aggregated, that we can confidently have good estimates for how long the question is taking in a survey. You can also see that it's still in raw format. It's not really easy to interpret. So if you quickly looked at it, you wouldn't be able to confidently say, okay, this is what I see. You know, there's a lot of backslashes, curly brackets. So this is not easy to interpret. Moreover, if you wanted to run some extra statistics, for example, standard deviation to understand how long surveys are varying or questions are varying from one enumerator to the next, you couldn't be able to do that easily with different files scattered within a media folder. So this is the sort of problem that our Python script precisely addresses. And at this point, I'll just pause here and hand it over to my colleague Bishrat, who will speak to you a little bit more about what our Python script does and how we finally solved the challenge that we had. Over to you, Bishrat.
Thank you, Sam. And to follow up on what you've been saying, I will try by first making a reference to the Ethiopian project that was mentioned earlier on. If you remember, we needed to drop some questions from our questionnaires to be able to finish the data collection within the set timelines. But while text audit files give us interview duration breakdown by question for each of the interviews completed, they don't give us an aggregated output that takes into account all the interviews completed. And this is really important in the sense of like overall project insight. Elsewhere, while again text audit files give us interview duration breakdown by question, they don't quite give us interview duration breakdown by module, by groups or repeat groups. This again is important in the sense we want to know which modules are taking longer, and we also want to be able to narrow down which questions in which modules are taking long so that we know which questions to drop. So Laterite has a Python script which takes as input all the text audit files along with the coded version of the survey instrument, which is in Excel, the CTO version, along with the dataset, and outputs an Excel file that will allow us to make decisions for the projects that we mentioned earlier on. Put simply, what our script basically does is merging all the text audit files and then outputs an Excel, a well-formatted Excel file that will allow us to know by question and by module level. That will allow us to make decisions to know which questions are taking long, which modules are taking long, and then at the end of the day, be able to make the decisions we need to make. So the output we get from the script would look something like this. We will not delve too much on how the script works, as like time is a real constraint, and we don't want to distract away from what you guys want to take away from this project and from this webinar. So I will just keep to what we get from the script. And as you see, the output from the script would look something like this. And if you check on the column names, you will see columns like mean, median, standard deviation, and different percentile values like P10, P25, P75, that are like summary statistics values that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. But along with those, you'll also see two columns, module and question. And what you find under column and question is the names of the questions as they appear in the coded version of the survey instrument. And likewise, under column and module, you will find the name of the group or repeat group names as they are found in the coded version of the instrument in the CTO version. To get back to the Ethiopian project, this is actually a snippet of the output we get from for that project after the first week of data collection. And to explain a bit more on that, under the column question, you'll see consent. This refers to a question where we ask our respondents if they agree to participate, to agree to be interviewed in our questionnaire. And based on the responses, we may ask them subsequent questions. To say a bit more on this, like I mentioned, under the column question, we get the name of the questions that as found in the CTO version of the instrument for the questions we ask our respondent. And for the question consent, where we ask our respondents if they agree to participate in the survey, we can look up in the output how long that question took for our respondents to listen to that question from our enumerators and then answer. In this particular case, we can see under the column and means that it took about 0.4 minutes on average. And based on the responses to these questions, we ask our respondents many questions inside a group called consented, where we ask them questions that are relevant to the questions of our client. And if you again look at under column and module in the table outputted, you will see in row 2 for consented, you will see on average this took about 67.51 minutes to complete. And looking further into the next column, which is STD, which stands for the standard deviation, we see 24.69 minutes, meaning that there was quite a spread around how long the survey took, taking into account all the interviews, meaning while some interviews took way shorter than 67 minutes, some took way longer than 67 minutes. However, this is to be expected, because in this group we have many questions that are asked based on the responses we get from other questions in our questionnaire. There are skip patterns that were set in our questionnaire. To be able to know how many times each question or each module was asked, we can always check on the count non-zero column, and where we will find in how many interviews each question was asked. In this particular case, while we asked after first week of data collection, while we have asked our 332 of our respondents if they agree to participate in the survey, only for 326 of those respondents agree to participate, and hence all the questions inside the group consented were followed up. For the sake of these presentations, I have focused more on the three columns, count and zero, mean, and standard deviations, as I found them relevant to the discussion. But depending on the needs, we may reference the other columns, like the different percentile values, like P10, P25, median, and other columns as per our need. And then returning back to the Ethiopian project that was mentioned earlier on, and what I continue to reference back. In the end, because we needed to make some survey cuts to our interview to be able to finish data collection, using the output, a more fuller version of the output you saw in the previous slide, we made some changes to the questionnaire, and in the end ended up in shortening some intro notes. We read out loud to our respondents before each module, so that they get a feel for the questions they will be asked, but while retaining again the information we want to communicate with them. Also, we ended up dropping a few verifications questions where we verify the age or sometimes the names of the persons if they are spelled right. And in the end, with these changes made, we were able to complete data collection within the set timelines. We're here to tell you that you can use the script in your future project, as our script is now publicly available, and you can find the script available on the GitHub link that we left here. And along with it, you'll also find a readme instruction on how it works and how you can use it. Thank you, everyone. And this was all our presentation, and I will hand it back to Mafia for further notes. And thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. And very useful and innovative way of getting through this. I'll just share my screen again. And like I mentioned earlier, we will go into a brief discussion. But before we do that, we had a poll that was running. I hope many of us have been able to fill that out. I'll just end the poll here and then share a bit of the results that we have. In the poll, we basically asked 3 questions. The first was relating to how many in this meeting have heard of text audits, and we have about 55% have heard of text audits, and of that 55% who have heard of text audits, we have about 40% or so who have actually added text audits to their forms. And then we are also asking, just trying to find out how many have struggled with interpreting text audit data. And I think of those that have used text audits, roughly about 35% say they've have had some struggles. So it's good that not many are struggling, but hopefully this provides a bit more a strength and knowledge to how you can go about using your text audits, taking advantage of them, and using them in a very very practical way. We do have a Q&A tab that's there. Please use it for any questions that you might have for Bizrat or for Samuel, or even for the SurveyCTO team. We'll be able to get into that. But before we do, we get to your questions, I did just want to ask Bizrat and Samuel a couple of questions, just thinking about the work that they did. So in your presentation, I think you hinted at some adjustments that you ended up making. Would you be able to just elaborate on maybe one of those? What kind of question or module is it that you found was taking long, and how did you go about reworking that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mofia, for that question. And I'll just build on what Bizrat mentioned earlier. There are questions that could be phrased differently, and that can save us a bit of time in a few seconds. Maybe by way of example, I can say, if you're asking a question, maybe I can even take an example of the question that we had here in the chat. So you ask, how many have you ever used text audits, or have you heard of them? And then you ask, did you find them useful or did you struggle with them? One way of restructuring a question could be like, put that all in one question, right? And maybe have an option where that, and one of the answer choices being, I've never used text audits, I've not heard of them. I don't know if that's clear, but like you could combine those two questions into one question, and that can save you a bit of time. So that's one of the, those are one of the approaches that we use to rework some of the questions. And as Bizrat mentioned, there are some intersections that we reduced a bit, as we noticed they did not maybe add too much information that the respondents already knew. So we shortened those. We also clearly dropped some questions that we agreed with the client that maybe they were not as important at that point to the research question. And Bizrat also mentioned questions that we thought were not maybe, they were good checks, but not maybe taking a bit more time. So yeah, those are some of the ways that we sort of reworked different questions and sections to be able to bring it down to a length that was desirable.
Interesting. I'm glad you hinted at that discussion with your clients. I'm curious, in your experience, have you ever had clients who object to adding text audits? And if so, what kind of objections have you ever kind of encountered? Because it's good to hear that your client, who you're able to sit with them, revise the question with them, and get the results. But I'm just wondering if you had any objections and what those objections would be.
I would say maybe fortunately for us, we haven't had that experience where the client has objected to the data from text audit. I think in our experience, clients are more grateful that they can get this question level information to be able to like make those informed decisions on dropping questions or making adjustment to questions. So it's the opposite in our experience. Clients are more grateful, are always grateful that they have this information. So yeah, no particular objections so far.
That's really good to hear. But it's such a useful tool that for the most part, clients almost always want you to be able to use it. Maybe one or two more questions. Are there any other features of SurveyCTO for data quality control that you use to complement the text audits insight? Yeah,
there's a SurveyCTO feature called minimum seconds. You can set it on a specific question. How long someone can spend, or like the minimum time they can spend on a specific question. So based on the data that we get from text audit, in some projects, we've used that data to set that minimum seconds that enumerators can spend on a specific question based on that information that we collected from text audit. So text audits helped us to, set the right minimum second, if you like. Curious, Bisrat, feel free to jump in if you have something to add to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also we also do audio audit text, and where we listen to some questions, recordings from some questions where we have some been listened to by our audio enumerators to check if our enumerators are listening to some of the questions. The questions that is being asked. And what we do is from the output from the script, we check on how long on average that question takes. And then when we do the audio audits, we tell our audio enumerators to check if the audio lasts way longer than we found it on the output from the script, or way shorter than the output we get from the script. Yeah,
that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. Maybe just one more question, and this is mainly from your experience. Do you have any takeaways about designing for quality? For example, do you see fewer problems in surveys that keep the questionnaire short, change how questions are asked, or improve the training of enumerators? This is really sort of just from your experience. What are some of the things that you look at affect the quality when you design your forms?
Yeah, absolutely. Shorter questionnaires are always good. Both, I think, for the research as well. It's really nice for researchers to collect only the information that they need for their research. So it's nice to keep it short to only the information that you need, but also on the side of the respondent, because it's nicer when they can spend less time, so less burden on their end. So yeah, that's really important. And also enumerators are central to this whole process. They're really the central piece to data collection. And in our case, we rely a lot on them for their feedback on how we can improve questions, on how we can better phrase them, because they're on the field, they're interacting with respondents, and they get the feedback from the respondents. So we rely a lot on them, even with the training we give them. We also rely a lot on their feedback to help us to better phrase the questions. And for questions, I think it's for questions, it's very important to always provide some hints. It's always nice to provide some examples in specific cases where questions are not very clear. So these are good tips to be able to have very, very efficient questions. Bisrat, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, also on this, if you have similar questions, in a questionnaire, and we see that from the output of the script, while one of the questions is taking way longer, way shorter, and while similar questions are taking on average the same time, it's always a good check to be able to see, to check those variables and then follow up with our enumerators when we have our debrief sessions at the end of the day every day. And this has helped us, that's everything from my end.
Okay. No, thanks a lot. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, so I will not extend our discussion any further. But just to mention for everybody else that's on the call, we've talked about a number of things. So if you have any questions, SurveyCTO, please, you can reach out to our support team. As I mentioned, I'm part of that support team. So for any who are on a paid server, they can reach out to a support team, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you have. Could be on some of these specific features we've talked about. And then if you're on community and you don't have a paid subscription, we do also have a community forum. You can simply go to that particular forum and ask your questions. The users, including users like Bizrat and Samuel, would be able to get in touch with you. But if you're currently not using SurveyCTO and you're interested in sort of what has been discussed here and you'd like to find out more, learn more, maybe get a demo, you can connect with Maria from our sales team. She's always ready to engage with you and be able to see how best SurveyCTO would fit your needs. But you can also keep an eye out on what's happening with SurveyCTO, features that are coming in, webinars like this one, by following us on any of our social media channels: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. So feel free to keep in touch with us that way.